Hi, my name is Stephen McGee and I'm the author of Toxic Electricity, and we're here to talk about FCC, approval of wireless products. And the reason why we're going to talk about that is because of this plant. If you look at this plant, the leaves are very small, and this is a Dieffenbachia, so anybody who grows the Dieffenbachia will recognize this plant is extensively deformed because the leaves are supposed to be the size of your hand. So I'm going to show you what a Dieffenbachia is supposed to look like. So this is what it's supposed to look like. So it's a very, very different plant. It's supposed to have leaves the size of your hand, very heavily patterned, with this two-tone colour to them. So it very clearly is not that plant, but it used to be that plant until it was grown around this little device. Now this is a little wireless temperature and humidity sensor that mounts on the outdoor of your home. So if you've got an indoor and outdoor thermometer or weather station, you have one of these devices that you mount onto the outdoor of your home, and it wirelessly transmits the signal to the indoor device reporting temperature and humidity. Well, you'll notice that this is approved by the FCC, and it says this device may not cause harmful interference. Well, it very clearly does cause harmful interference because it's extensively biologically affected this plant. So we're going to talk about how this little harmful electromagnetic producing device was actually allowed into the marketplace, and there's two tests that it was subjected to that it had to pass to get into the marketplace, and we're going to talk about them. And the first one is the specific absorption rate. So the specific absorption rate requires this little device to subject a piece of tissue or simulated human tissue for 6 minutes to heating from the device, and if it stays below a certain level over that 6 minutes, it gets approved for the marketplace. So let's replicate that test. So here's our Jello. So the FCC has something similar to Jello, which mimics skin, and what they do is they simply put the device next to the Jello, and at the start of the test they put a thermometer in it and they take the reading, and then 6 minutes later, after the device has heated the Jello, they take another reading, and if that reading is within a set range of values, then it passes the test. But there's another test it has to pass to get into the marketplace, and that's a radio frequency test. So the FCC has a meter similar to this, and they hold it up to the transmitting device, and if it reads below 61 volts per meter, then it's approved. So that's the two tests that I have found that the FCC does to approve these devices for the marketplace. And based on that information, I consider any device that's carrying an FCC ID to be very suspect, because the thing you'll notice is nothing was alive in the test. So there was no rats, there was no mice, there was no monkeys, there was nothing, no humans. So that's how they're deciding that these products are approved for the marketplace. And the whole story gets a little bit more suspicious when you look at this diagram. So we've got this table of information. It came from PowerWatch. You can get this off the internet. PowerWatch has a website that has this table on it. And you'll notice at the very top of the table, at 61 volts per meter, we have the USA. So the USA have the most lax standards of any country in the world, from what I can gather, when it comes to wireless radiation. And 61 volts per meter is a very, very large amount of wireless energy. You don't want to be around 61 volts per meter. And you look down here, we have the government of Salzburg. They've set a wireless radiation level of 0.06 volts per meter. So you can see there's something very fishy going on with countries around the world in their wireless radiation levels. And for some reason, the USA has decided it's going to have the highest standards for the highest wireless energy levels, which increases the wireless energy risks for anybody purchasing wireless products. So I got curious and I started wondering, what's been going on? What's the history on this subject? And how far does it go back? And you'll come across this guy, Dr. John Nash-Ott. Dr. John Nash-Ott wrote this book in the late 50s called My Ivory Cellar, and it extensively talks about harmful effects on plants from electrical and electronic products. And then he wrote this one in the 1970s called Health and Light. Again, his research had extensively developed at that point, and he was finding very extensive harmful biological effects from electrical and electronic products. And in the 1980s, he wrote this book, Light, Radiation and You, How to Stay Healthy. And his research was extensive at that point, and he was finding all kinds of weird biological effects going on in living organisms that were subjected to these energy fields that are around electrical and electronic products today. So I've actually extensively researched the subject, and my latest research in this subject is in this book. It's called Solar Radiation, Global Warming and Human Disease. And I've actually classified the harmful effects of these devices. And there's a pretty clear classification that's emerging today. And my assessment of the situation is that these devices, there's many of these devices that are in common use today by the population that are extensively biologically toxic. And they all have this FCC approval on them. So my advice to you is that because there's so much information on the subject saying that these wireless devices are toxic, that you should avoid wireless products. And if you value your health, I would recommend that you turn off as many of your wireless products as you can. You really shouldn't have wireless products in your home. And it's unfortunate that we're now in the smart meter epidemic. If you do a search on smart meter sickness, you'll find that there's many people reporting problems around these smart meters. They're also called automatic meter readers and advanced meter infrastructure that the utilities are using. But essentially the utility companies have gone wireless. So if you've got utility meters at your home, and most people commonly have water, gas and electric utility meters, so 3 per property, you may find that there's 3 wireless transmitters on your property, and they tend to be the most harmful form of wireless communication, which is pulsed. So there's a lot of people getting sick from these wireless meters. And if you look at those meters, they all have the FCC approval, which means that they were not tested on rats, monkeys, mice, humans. They were just tested using an electronic meter and a thermometer and got approved for the marketplace. Very clearly, it's not a biological test. The FCC is not testing any of these products on live animals. The only true biological test that there is a live animal or plant test on a living cellular organism. Anything that's conducted on a dead cellular organism, you've got to be very suspicious of it. And I can recommend some more books on this subject. So if you're interested in finding out more information, I can recommend Disconnect by Deborah Davis. I can also recommend this book. This is Public Health SOS by Camilla Rees and Magda Havis. And there's also this book. This is a very interesting book. It's available for a free download on the internet. It's called Cellular Telephone Russian Roulette. And all of these books are raising concerns about the wireless industry. And they're all saying that there's many of these products that probably shouldn't be in the marketplace. And I would recommend that you start getting familiar with the work and research in this area, particularly if you have young children and babies, because they are the most affected by this. And I find it very concerning that I have products in my home, and it wasn't limited to this. My utility meters were also causing biological growth defects in my garden. And I had a number of products in service in my house that when I took them out of service, many plants that were dormant sprang back into life. And I hadn't seen them do any significant growth for many years, and they're now growing. So they were very clearly being affected by wireless radiation. So that's the FCC for you. That's how they approve products. And there's an overwhelming amount of information today that says what the FCC is doing is not effective biological testing, and that the FCC needs to revisit its standards and change them so that it is doing live biological testing of these products. And if you've got any of these products with the FCC marking, my advice to you is I would ignore that marking. I would consider the device as an untested and unproven product that you need to do your own biological testing. And doing your own biological testing is as simple as buying a Dieffenbachia plant and putting the device next to your plant and watching the plant. And if the plant changes after several months into something like this, then you've got problems. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I wish you the very best of health. Thank you.